All right, everyone. If you are falling in love with Union College over the course of our program today, great. So am I. It sounds awesome. I wish I were actually Matt invited me in between segments to apply, which I think was really kind of him. I don't know if I would get in even now, but I appreciate it. We want to talk a little bit about the cost of attendance at Union, and we want to understand what mechanisms are in place to help support families to afford the cost of Union. And so we've got the head of financial aid from Union College, Linda Parker, here joining us here in the final segment. Hi, Linda. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Okay,
So,
so yeah,
yes. So what do we think about with respect to financial aid? If you could just give us like a brief overview of the different mechanisms that are in place for you to be able to provide financial support for families that are looking at Union.
sure. That's a great question. So over 60% of the students at Union receive some type of need-based aid. I would say that the most impactful policy that we have is that we meet the full demonstrated need of those students whom we admit.
Yeah.
Less than 5% of all colleges and universities across the nation can say that they make that same commitment to meaningful need. And having said that, we also recognize that, formulas don't necessarily take into account all of the challenging financial circumstances that families may have had either in the past to be able to save for college or even currently to be able to contribute towards college. So at Union, I like to think of what we offer in financial aid as three diverse types of aid offerings. So our first one is obviously most of the aid that we offer to students is based on financial need. We use the CSS profile as our measurement to determine how much need-based aid a student would be eligible to receive. And that's essentially for families who don't have unique or unusual circumstances. Now, in the fall of 2020, we launched what is called the Making You Possible initiative. So recognizing that there were some families who would apply for need-based aid and either they just missed eligibility or they qualified for very small amounts. And so for both of those categories, those families weren't financially able to choose Union. It just wasn't going to be a possibility for them.
Right.
And, for a variety of reasons, families may have had a period of sustained unemployment where maybe they're working now, so they have earning power, but, maybe they depleted some of their savings during that period of unemployment, or maybe they've already put 2 or 3 kids through college and depleted savings. And some families, we hear from them all the time, have, withdrawn from their retirements to do that.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to target those families. And so through the Making You Possible initiative, we've been able to offer grants to those families that range from $23,000 to $35,000 a year.
Whoa. That's not a small number, listeners.
It's not.
That's a really big number.
And we find that it's been very helpful to families who otherwise would not have been able to even consider a union.
Yeah.
And then our third one is merit. So we do offer some merit to students each year, and those awards range actually from $18,000 to $30,000 a year. And those are guaranteed for 4 years of full-time undergraduate study, so no strings attached.
Those are all great. And a lot of the way that you're describing this financial aid policy and approach is very similar to my time at Reed College, except that we did not have merit scholarships. And I can recall how challenging it was for families that barely missed the cutoff to be able to actually look at the sticker price and say, we can't afford to pay this full freight. We understand we don't qualify because of this formula. And so I can understand how that Making You Possible initiative is really, really powerful. I also think it's really important what you said about meeting 100% of demonstrated need. A lot of people will gravitate towards a need blind policy as being the good thing in the college application process without understanding that that is not helpful unless 100% of demonstrated need is met. And then actually what you would want is a need aware policy that meets 100% of need if necessary. Matt, what are you in the admission office? Are you operating with need blind or are you need aware in the admission?
No, we are need aware because you hit the nail on the head, and you got a very good sense of that. It's our commitment is to meet the full demonstrating need of all of our admitted students. And on the margins of acceptance, we are need aware, but we don't want to walk away from that commitment, which, as you pointed out, is the right way to go. And I'm glad you mentioned it.
So this fall, Linda, has been kind of a nightmare for financial aid offices with FAFSA simplification. I don't know if I'm understating it or overstating that. I think I'm understating it because FAFSA data are just still not available, I believe. You have the profile, which is helpful in some ways, I would imagine. But how has this so-called simplification thrown a wrench into your traditional approach to making awards?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that we do use a CSS profile. So for those students who we've admitted already for the upcoming 24-25 academic year, we've been able to provide financial aid offers to those students using the CSS profile. So and not to say that not having a FAFSA hasn't impacted us, it has, but in smaller amounts than other schools who just use the FAFSA. And so it's, we're learning more each day as time rolls out with the Department of Ed, and there's a few more glitches that are happening. We're supposed to start receiving FAFSAs no later than mid-March. So today's the 13th, so we've got a couple days to keep them honest. I did read earlier today that some schools receive FAFSAs over the weekend, but I understand that's a group of pilot schools, and I think there's been some issues with them. So I think there may be a little bit more delay to be expected on the FAFSA front.
On that tied to that, Ian, it's one thing that's been a challenge because as if we have a profile, we're in pretty good shape.
Right.
What's been interesting though is talk about like this conversation we have about binary and not binary. The common application, the coalition application, there's a checkbox saying, are you seeking need-based aid? But for a student, that could simply be in their mind's eye alone. And so some people will not be seeking, real scholarship assistance, but they'll check the box. In most years, if we get their FAFSA, we can be like, no need to chase the other forms. Like you don't qualify for need-based aid, no need to move on. Without having the FAFSA information, it leaves us with some situations where we don't know if the family just hasn't filled out the forms or where they're at. And so it's added a little confusion on the admission side, and it's also taken away the double check on the financial aid side that, they fill out both forms. And
that would have been very hard for us in our process because no forms for us meant the family did an EFC and they figured, we're not going to qualify for aid, so we're just not going to bother sending in the forms. Now it's, well, there's no forms because you've not got them from Department of Ed yet, which is really, really challenging. What has this meant for both of your offices? I mean, Linda, have you had to communicate just much more with families this year to let them know what's going on? And same question to you, Matt, after Linda answered, like, how have you had to change your approach this year because of this?
Yeah, so for our current students, we've just recently opened up the portal for 24-25 and sent them information on reapplying for financial aid for the upcoming year. And yes, there's been a slew of questions and confusion from families. And we've tried to let them know, check your portal. We understand that, you're going to see that the FAFSA is not received by our office. We understand that. We will not consider, that will not jeopardize your aid or anything going forward, but it has been a lot of extra communication. Either we've been sending emails and notices to students and families, and also just fielding a lot of extra questions from students who are a little angst about not being able to see that we've received their FAFSA, even though they've submitted it.
Yeah, that's tough. Matt, how's it changed your enrollment management approach this year?
We're normally there's a few delivery points along the way, and we've had to kind of have more than one tranche when we release admission decisions as a result of it. There's some students were waiting for more information, want to make sure we've got the full picture. And so our admit dates, which are usually, everyone gets the decision on the same exact date, that's not going to be as clean as it's been in years past.
Are you anticipating, or have you even announced yet the need to move your enrollment deadline?
No, we're in fact, we'll be sending out a bulk of our regular decision admission letters this Saturday. And so we're sticking to May 1 as our plan. Obviously, we'll want to have individual conversations with people if they're running into problems from what they're hearing from other places. But we're a school with early action and early decision. So those decisions have been out for many, many, many weeks.
Gotcha.
And so we're hopeful, at least for the bulk of people, to stick to May 1.
It's I think what you two are describing is sort of a microcosm of what different universities are facing in different kinds of ways. But there is some uniqueness to Union, both with the kinds of scholarships that you described, Linda. And then you also, in preparing for the show, you talked about some special programs that you have to support some underrepresented students. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to those a little bit, especially as a result. The SCOTUS decision, I think, has affected in some ways the ways that colleges are able to think about supporting underrepresented students. And so this financial avenue is kind of interesting. What do you have to share there?
Yeah, so we have two college access programs at Union. The Higher Education Opportunity Program, where we partner with New York State to enroll and support students who come from both economically and educationally disadvantaged backgrounds. And then Union also kind of mirrors that program with their own academic opportunity program. The only difference between our Union specific is you don't have to be from New York State. You can be from any state. In fact, you can be from another country. We actually have some international students who are part of our academic opportunity program. And so we try to enroll about 15 students each year from each of these cohorts. So on average, we have about 120 of these students on campus at any given time.
Nice. That's good.
They receive a significant financial aid resources from us, and as well as reduction or waived fees for term abroad, health insurance, summer housing. Anything that's an extra expense, we tend to subsidize for these cohorts. And then they also receive a huge array of supportive services on campus.
It's quite special also to hear that number is at 120, because I think one of the challenges of a program like that is feeling like you're maybe the only one that's getting that level of support. And so to have, this is what, 5% of your student population that's in this position, if my math is right, 20 of the 2000. So I think that's great. I think it's really great to hear that it's that number. Matt, we only have like a minute left, and I hate to be someone that says, "Hey, what about this SCOTUS decision? How's that impacting you?" Give you a minute. But has there been anything that you have been found to be successful in light of the fact that you cannot consider race as a part of the admission process in preserving diversity this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we can talk about all manners of a student's background, except for a fairly major one, their race, ethnicity. But the ruling itself doesn't say you can't talk about that at all. What it does is it individualizes the conversation about, like, what are the characteristics, traits that this student's gonna be able to bring to Union College because of their life experiences. And we've always prided ourselves on being in a place that, has the time and commitment to read the full application and spend real time talking about the individual contributions. So, we'll see how things end up. We're blind to it throughout the process. So we'll see where things end. But it's just, in some ways, redoubled our approach to make sure we're talking about this individual, what this individual can promise to bring to Union, how they're going to be able to contribute to, both the academic and the extracurricular communities. I was glad to see it wasn't as narrowly tailored as I feared it might be. But, hope springs eternal.
Some room for optimism there. Well, I think the programs you have at Union are wonderful, both on the finance side and then, of course, the core educational program. Linda, thanks for coming on and walking us through this. And I feel for you this year. I'm sorry it's been this huge unforced error, but I hope that it's all rectified for next year and it's smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's the light. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're hoping for you. And then Matt, thank you so much for sticking around for the whole show and leading us through the initial introduction and being a co-pilot on today's podcast. I appreciate it.
Great. Happy to be here.
All right, folks, that does it for today's episode. Next week, we're doing a deep dive into community colleges. Lots of great programs in the communities in which you or your students live. And so we're going to talk more about how you can find those. We also like to learn a little bit more about the folks who do listen to our podcast every week. And so we've stood up a survey for you. You can find that at coll.coach/podcast survey. That's coll.coach/podcast survey. We want to know who you are and how you find us every single week. Until next week, thanks so much for joining us. Maybe do a little bit of research on Union College. It's pretty cool. And we'll see you here again at the end of March. Take care. Bye-bye.